Remnants of a Forgotten Past by Alban 55, Chapter 5, Primordial. The site of Cataloho wasn't just a battlefield, it was a massacre of unpredictable proportions. No matter how prepared the small village in the wilds thought they were, it wasn't enough. They were getting pushed by the floods of Grim that the Clover Troop was releasing, and they didn't have the mobilization to strike back at sorts. In more ways than one even, they couldn't get the head of the figurative Nevermore, but they also couldn't even clip its wings. It was like attacking the feathers it would fire. There were simply more where that came from. Amongst all the mingling cages, the garishly dressed employees, there was something missing, something that Felides noticed almost immediately, since her eyes were searching for the man she hated the most. Hopes and expectations were two different things. The fact of the matter is that she expected the ringmaster to be in the safest possible place. She poked her head out of her enclave, placing a palm on the wooden stakes that she and Naruto were crouched directly underneath. Damn it! There's no sign of Van Clava anywhere. No way the ringleader himself would endanger himself on the front lines, I guess. He's gonna let his monsters do the work for him. Flideus hissed, crouching down below roughly and not caring when she elbowed Naruto in the face by accident. Naruto winced and rubbed his cheek in irritation before he looked beyond the tree line. "Hey, what's that behind all the grim cages?" Naruto asked, pointing a finger to where he was referring. Flides growled and squinted her eyes, looking beyond the grim cages and the retainers to see the carriages containing the portable big top itself. There were other cages there too, smaller than the ones that would contain the grim, and several of them were completely empty. They hung in the back, being intended to by their own circus employees. Naruto had seen a shock of colored fabric moving back there somewhere and poking something with a prod belonging to one of the garishly dressed circus employees who tended the cages. "Faunus cages," Flides growled in pure hatred. "When not entertaining the masses, they don't care. If those eyesores are on view for everyone to see, they're going to use the Grim to weaken our village, and when we've effectively surrendered, those empty cages among their ranks are going to house whoever they want from the village." Some manner of Grim had already entered the clearing outside the front of Catalihuk, but Naruto was uneasy. "I've got a bad feeling about this. I can't shake that they're going to send more than Grim at us. There are humans employed by the Clover Troop, as we can see. They can be sneakier than these monsters." Naruto furrowed his brow in thought. If there was anyone who knew the danger fellow people could possess, it was Ninja. Sneaky, that described any number of their species. Ninja made their living on being sneaky. Well, when they weren't being flashy powerful, that is. Did these people really need to make a stealthy maneuver though? Altshear had told them that it was a staple of the Clover Troop, but they seemed to be simply trying to overwhelm with brute force. Sneakier, huh? Sneakier. Naruto's eyes widened, and he climbed to his feet immediately and frantically leaving his post as his eyes moved in the direction of the village's rear. Flideus reacted to him as well, jumping up and roaring at him. "What are you doing? Where are you going? Get back here, boy! You have to protect your post!" Flideus spat at him before she lowered her shoulders in resignation as she watched the boy she didn't like run off past the houses and tents to the less protected rear end of the village. Her words fell on deaf ears as Naruto ran to the other side of the village, abandoning his post. The front end of the village was the perfect avenue for attack, a grassy field where the marsh receded and allowed humanity to build on. If the wagons of the circus were going to come from somewhere, it would have to be there. The terrain behind the village turned into a steep slope leading back into more marsh not long after exiting the village, but possibly to bring any sort of transportation up. But no one in the village would expect anyone coming from that side because their natural defenses had helped them before. When he got to the other side, he cursed when his fears were confirmed. They had been so prepared about the front of the village where the circus and the Grim were coming. They had even known that the Clover Troop would play dirty, but it took the lack of humans from the front side for Naruto to realize it. Many circus employees were coming from behind the village. They had either snuck around while the village was occupied or took a different route and climbed up the slope. To top it all off, there was enough trees and shrubs in the area between the slope and the town. They had enough undergrowth to blend in and surprise them while they were distracted with the Grim. Then, who knew how many civilian targets they could snatch under the nose of the warriors? There were about a dozen circus employees hiding in the underbrush behind the village, each concealing themselves in their own particular manner and waiting for the right moment. When the warriors were all forcibly drawn away from their post, though by ninja standards they weren't doing a good job of hiding, as to the trained eye they could be picked out one by one. He even saw a shock of blue hair sticking out from behind a nearby bush. Naruto let a smirk cross his face as he casually reached into his weapons pouch and slipped his fingers through the ring on one of his kunai. Without even hesitating, Naruto lobbed the knife at the blue-haired hider first. When the blade whizzed through the underbrush, there was a cry of shock, followed by a body flopping out into plain sight in order to avoid the thrown blade. Already he heard the others bristle in their hiding places, probably from a mixture of stress and irritation at their companion for blowing their cover, but Naruto was focused on the circus employee that he attacked. It was a boy around maybe 11 or 12, so perhaps only a little younger than Naruto himself. The shock of electric blue hair was easily the most noticeable thing, but he was dressed in a garish red jacket that was one of the standard circus uniforms. God damn it! He saw your stupid hair, Vasilis. We were supposed to sneak up on them while they're distracted with the Grim. So what are you going to tell Mr. Claver now that you've blown our cover? The boy picked himself off the ground, the very definition of misery. Naruto pinpointed the voice who reprimanded him as coming from a nearby tree, but the other employee didn't step out of his hiding place. You blew our cover. You beat up that kid who thought to check behind the village. Well, apparently the circus employees didn't have any love lost for their co-workers. That was good for Katalyuk. At least this kid decided to work for a corrupt circus, though Naruto couldn't help but notice how miserable he was while doing so. It made him wonder about the recruitment process of the employees. One by one, though, the other employees began to exit their hiding spots. Most of them were older than the blue-haired boy, with a variety of builds and uniforms. So it's settled then. Neptune, you take care of that kid while the rest of us enter the village and raid it for all it's worth, one of them said, as the other 25 or so circus employees laughed uproariously and began to walk forward. Naruto closed his eyes and focused on the sounds of clashing weapons and roaring Grim. That didn't take long. The two sides had already been engaged. Naruto frowned, putting his hands into a seal. A line of 100 clones popped into existence while flanking the entrance of the village that the circus group was trying to break into. The smiles were instantly whipped up their faces. The demoralized look on the newly dubbed Neptunes dropped farther than a stone down a well. The lanky boy's eyes panned between the many different identical versions of Naruto, finally settling on the one he thought made the clones. The other employees backed up almost instinctively. Well, Neptune, hop to it, one of them said, and like clockwork, all of the garish dressed circus employees began to back up from the line of clones slowly. Huh, you can't expect me to fight all these guys? I'm just one kid. I don't even get paid for all that much. Neptune whined as desperately seeking support from some of his co-workers. One of the circus employees stopped backing away a moment sooner than his colleagues. It was the one who had been screaming at Neptune the entire time. Get the fuck up there and kill this fucking kid already, you shitty brat! He roared, a vein popping on his forehead and spit flying from his mouth, a fleck of which landed on Neptune's face. Neptune flinched at the words and spittle, and Naruto felt a stab of pity enter his system. Nevertheless, he stood his ground on the flank outside the village, and he squashed the pity when the sounds of grim roars resonated from the other side. The others needed him to do this, even if they may have wondered where he had run off to. The blue-haired boy in front of Naruto seemed to gain some semblance of bravery, for he pulled out a weapon in its compact mode. It instantly morphed into what appeared to be a plasma gun that was much too big for his small body. His eyes panned through the line of clones before settling on one. He held the barrel up to his shoulder and fired a small burst of blue plasma at one of the clones, who dispersed into a puff of smoke. But that was just one clone, and Naruto hardly seemed torn up about his loss. He sent 3 clones forward, all of them rushing at once, which was a usual Uzumaki tactic. The three clones surrounded Neptune, encircling him on all sides and cutting off any maneuverability. Like that, they successfully managed to restrain Neptune. One of the clones roughly grabbed the other kid's collar, nearly ripping the fabric and slamming the boy's body into the dirt. Against all odds, Neptune managed to hold onto his weapon, but his face was still planted in the dirt as he felt one of the clones' feet press into his back. The others cracked their knuckles and prepared to administer another beatdown, but Neptune on instinct pressed the button on his gun and configured it into the alternative form of Guando. The electronic blade of the weapon took 2 of the clones off guard, and they were caught against the edge of the blade as Neptune shifted the weapon. One of the clones dispelled was the one holding him down, so Neptune spat out a mouthful of dirt and lashed out with the bladed weapon, catching the third clone and dispelling that one too. Bruised and scuffed, Neptune got to his feet and sputtered out more dirt. He lofted his weapon, but the line of Naruto clones glared at him and held out their hands in a stop gesture. Huh? Neptune asked, raising an eyebrow. Naruto shook his head, and his eyes turned to the cowardly group of circus workers that left their fighting to a single kid. They were merely milling around. Some of them had their weapons drawn or had their trigger fingers on their holsters. About half of them had dust-powered rifles as weapons, which could be problematic if he was rushing in alone. The others befitted their circus status, had electric whips. The real Naruto took a step forward, and Neptune and the others tensed. Neptune stood dumbfounded, shakenly raising his weapon as Naruto talked in his direction, only to walk right past him. Naruto locked eyes with the de facto leader of the circus goons, eyes narrowing into an angry glower. Open fire! The man said, the same one who had betrayed Neptune and backed off like a coward. The goons with guns did as they were told and shot round after round at Naruto. He just kept walking without a care in the world, but was halted as a fire dust shell hit him square in the chest. He winced for a moment, and the circus employee seemed to cheer. Yes! The leader screamed, only to gawk when the boy disappeared into a poof of smoke, only to be replaced by a medium-sized stone as if he were never there. What? He turned his head frantically around before a fist impacted said face. The impact sent him sailing to the ground, but a clone popped into existence right under his back and pushed the man right back up. The real Naruto contorted himself around his back, pinning his limbs and wrapping an arm around his jugular. Not 1 minute too soon, as he pivoted the leader just as soon as the other gun goons pointed their weapons at him. Only now there was a human shield in the way, and the man knew it. Idiots, lower your weapons! Don't you realize that I'm in the way? He screamed frantically, the forearms pressed against his throat, making it somewhat croaky and difficult to speak. One of the other circus goons, a skinny bald man with a snake tattoo, snickered as he looked down his sights. So, you told us to open fire, and that's what we're doing. And with that, 11 guns in rhythm opened fire without any hesitation. Upon the stream of red and yellow projectiles, there came a poof of smoke, as well as a body that became riddled with holes as the fire and electric dust tore through the man. When the man collapsed, it was with a sickening crunch onto a rock that had randomly appeared there via Naruto's Kawarimi. The real Naruto didn't appear beside the goons again, since he had used the rock from the other side of the village for his second substitution. Good thing he added that extra camaraderie to be on the safe side. He didn't expect these gunmen to be so willing to riddle their friend with holes, though in hindsight, the line of clones protecting the village still remained, but Naruto was waiting for an opportunity anyways to get out there when he heard the roars of Grim increase in intensity. He just didn't think it would come to that at that particular moment, but he took the rock from his Kawarami from the other side of the village. But when he disappeared from the rear of the village, he didn't realize that the remaining circus workers stared down the line of clones with determination on their faces, up to and including Neptune. The blue-haired boy fired a blast at another clone in the line, drawing their attention after he popped one. He hoped that line of clones he left would be enough to defend the village from backside invaders. But when he looked upon the battlefield for the first time, he realized he was probably needed over here. Naruto, where have you been? They told me you left your post and went running in some random direction. He heard Arthur bark, and Naruto easily picked out the huge lion man in the pandemonium. I was tending to some stuff. Some goons from the circus tried to sneak up from behind the village and pilfer some of our non-fighters. I think I've dealt with them for the time being. Alchir blinked. Is that so? Good call, quick thinking. Who knows what could have happened if you didn't get over there in time? But more importantly, we're really on the ropes here. We've lost 24 warriors already, and the Grim just keep coming. He was right. The strategy of the Clover Troop was obvious and crushed them with brute force since they knew they could overwhelm them, and it was working too. Any of the Catholic warriors hadn't had the opportunity to go on the attack, and the big top was simply sitting pretty on the other side of the bank. All of the forces had to remain near the village simply to ward off any oncoming Grim, but fighting the Grim was like removing the tail from a lizard rather than its head. They were sending out Grim right now from their cages, but the employees and the leadership weren't trying to fight them directly. They were hanging out behind the tree line, waiting like vultures. What Catholic needed was a big attack to finish off all the Grim at once. I know just the thing, Naruto thought as he bit into his thumb. After a few quick seals, he pressed his hands down onto the ground, expecting a spiderweb of seals to spread and a puff of smoke to appear. Kujusho no Jutsu. Nothing happened. Not even the spiderweb of steel spread it out. Naruto grimaced at the lack of a toad that he summoned as he stared blankly at the palm of his hand. Not even a tadpole had popped out. Perhaps it had something to do with its location. The beowulf pounced. A beowulf pounced while Naruto was crushed over, but there was a crack as a force impacted its chest and sent it sprawling. Archie lowered his fist and glared at Naruto. Naruto, what are you doing? Look alive! Naruto shot up rigidly and blinked, pursing his mouth in a fish-like expression. Sorry, he apologized before quickly changing the subject. Hey, can you help me clear a path to the big top over there? We're never going to get anywhere unless we take the head right off. Archie grunted. Are you crazy? We've spread out all our warriors as is keeping the Grim from trying to enter the village. Archie roared back at him as he obliterated Ursa with merely his palm. And how do you plan on coming out of this alive, huh? They have too many Grim, and more of them are coming just by being attracted to the fight. How long do you think we can hold this back? If I can get through to the big top, I'm sure I can do something. Archie growled in stress and anger, but he didn't exactly have a rebuttal to Naruto's argument, and after seeing what he could do for the last week, he was there ace in the hole, and looking around while warriors holding down the village picked off Grim that got close to the village. Those outside were quickly getting overwhelmed. There was hundreds of beowulfs and Ursai littering the battlefield in putrid rows of black. A few deathstalkers were thrown in here and there along with the barber tusks, but thankfully they had no remorse. Still, though, there wasn't much room to even move. The area was so packed with Grim. Archie sighed, and with a spinning kick, flung a tornado of Grim away from him. Fine, he stated. Archie clenched his fist, and his muscles bulged as he swung at a passing Beowulf. The stunned Grim hit the deck and yelped as Archie placed the foot at its back. Phidias, get out here! The rest of you, we doubled the efforts into protecting the front gates. You're all gonna have to pick up our slack, so be prepared. The village leader said, even as the dear woman perked up and stuck her head out from behind her post. As a ranged warrior, she was tasked with picking off threats from afar while simultaneously being part of the final defense of Kataliuk. What's up, Chief? She inquired once she arrived after shooting her way through a swarm of Grim to reach the two. Archie pointed beyond the tree line to the red and white tent rising above the landscape. I need your help. You and I have the most firepower of all our warriors. Together we need to cut a way through the Grim so Naruto can go to where Van Claver is surely hiding. Vidal glared down at Naruto. Is that it? Or are we really just making an escape route or a way for him to rejoin his comrades? How do you even know they would attack from the rear? Would you stop with that crap already? The amount of bite in the imposing man's voice was enough to freeze even the surly woman. Naruto here is the only reason some of our people haven't already been taken hostage by the circus thugs. And would you look at how things are doing? You're gonna let your trust issues get in the way in our survival, he spat. Fidelis took a step back, a sign of her nervousness. She didn't say anything, but she fixed Archie with an angry look. Her gray eyes were practically screaming. You don't know the things he mumbled in his sleep. This thing is neither a human nor a faunus. To think here I was worried about a simple circus employee in our midst. But Archie stared her back just as intensively, urging Phileas to stop and think about their survival. Swip! Naruto blinked as an arrow of ice flashed between him and Archie and froze a contingent of a half a dozen Grim directly in his way. Their inhuman growls were silenced as they were frozen in a block of ice and snuffed out. Fine, she said tersely, but on one condition, I'm coming with you to confront that slime Van Clever once face to face, and to keep an eye on you to make sure you don't try anything. She added the last part in her head. Stand back, she said darkly, pulling out a special arrow from her quiver. Archie quirked an eyebrow and nodded slightly frankly at Naruto to do what he was told. She then raised her metallic bow, notching the arrow with the black tip in place. She pulled back the bowstring, the tip glowing with gravity dust. The dear woman blew a strand of black hair away from her face and then fired the arrow at the wall of Grim coming from the direction of the big top. The heavy arrow flew through the air, aided by the aerodynamic propulsion of its shaft and feathers, but the gravity dust it was imbued with was the heaviest type of dust on the planet. It bore through the Deathstalker, splitting it in half and sending both parts veering off to the side to disintegrate. After that, it hit a few Beowulfs and Ursai behind it, before crashing with a thud into the dirt not far beyond the scattering more Grim. She fired another arrow and another. I don't have an unlimited amount of these, so you two Nimrods better help me. Archie smirked and undid some buttons on his sleeves. After opening them up, he slid down two golden bracelets from his forearms to his wrist. After clacking them together, they began an enormous set of fighting gauntlets with the metal sculpting of a lion's head on the fist. They glowed with the residuous power of his aura. Naruto almost squealed in excitement as he saw the large weapons, swaying back and forth as he grinned at the sheer size of those things and the cool lion symbol. Archie wielded them with ease too. Okay, Naruto, I'll clear a path for you, and for this, now that she has thinned the numbers a bit with her gravity, stay behind me and just pick off as many as and any that I don't get. Naruto didn't need any prompting, lobbing 2 more kunai at some stragglers after the 3 arrows that they fired made a hole in the grim. He began running through the swath of underbrush through the tree line as he and Archie mowed down the lessened numbers of grim. The lion man's punches were like a mighty hammer strikes, almost augmented by the power of his steel gauntlets. Every Beowulf and Ursa he struck disintegrated almost instantly, and if they didn't disintegrate instantly, then they were sent flying into other grim. Yet despite all that, more Grim just kept coming. The monsters were protecting the Clover Troop well, even if they didn't exactly intend on doing so. They simply went for the most concentrated area of negative emotions and kept coming in droves. Archie panted, but he kept on pushing, pounding his way through the swarms of Grim while trying to keep them off himself and the 2 people that were counting on him. Hiya! With a quick burst, he split open a Beowulf that signified the end of the wave, but when he looked up, there was still a wave of Grim blocking them from reaching the Clover Troop. Archie cursed and backpedaled, getting himself to a more open clearing and avoiding attacking the Grim head-on. Upon seeing that, Fidel stopped firing arrows while he circled back behind Naruto and Flide and shook his head. They just keep coming. There's too many of them, and I don't think we'll be able to break through at this rate. The 2 adults and the young teen got together in a triangular formation, backs facing each other with their weapons drawn. Naruto looked around, eyes half-lidded, and as his mind made the mental connection, he could have simply used a Karama to get over there, but ever since he arrived, he noticed that he was using his clones in ways that he hadn't before. Like when he created some on the wings of that Nevermore, he didn't know where he got the idea for that, nor did he realize that he could plant clones in a specific point in space at that. He didn't see any other option, so he put his hands into his most familiar seal. He wouldn't physically be there, but having a few clones be there would allow him to scout out the area, sneak into the big top, and if the ringleader wasn't much of a fighter, Kagebunsha no Jutsu! He executed the technique, but there was no proof of smoke in visible range. Despite not being able to see it, Naruto could feel the familiar exit of chakra that always occupied the use of the jutsu. He was confident in his clone's ability to execute, and so he redoubled his efforts alongside Lieutenant and Archie. Meanwhile, a singular clone popped into existence behind a tree near the circus camp, essentially a scout at the moment. He hid in the underbrush and observed the location. There were circus employees running around tending to gates, but the Grim were restless. Most of them took a safe distance and opened the gates remotely, but the old cages were creaky and unreliable, and sometimes didn't respond to the remotes. Therefore, they often had to open the gates by hand. And it wasn't a pretty sight. One thin teenager employee was torn apart the moment he opened the gate right before Naruto arrived. Before the Grim, he realized sought out new prey. Crash bang! That was the sound of great strength of the Grim pounding against their sturdy metal cages. From Beowulfs to Deathstalkers, the Crimson Eyes were practically trained in unison, and the pounding in sync. What's going on? One of the frantic employees shouted, fiddling with his remote. Sure, the Grim got very unruly, but this display of aggression was unheard of even for the creatures of darkness. The chattering of humans slowed down, and attention fell over the battlefield. The sounds coming from the Grim weren't a cacophony. They were a symphony that was slowly but surely getting softer. The roar settled into low growls, and the pounding slowly became softer when the Grim realized they couldn't escape the reinforced cages. The want and desire to rip and tear asunder didn't dissipate though. They were all looking around for the source of negative emotions they knew was there, despite quickly and subtly yet intently, like he were a trophy on display that was just out of reach, and they were all doing it in unison. The Naruto clone raised his head. A blue flag above the circus tent flew proudly, but at the foot was the establishment appeared to be a reinforced wooden wall, probably to keep their own Grim out. Yet behind and to the right of the big top was the wagon hitched directly to it. End of chapter 5.